Wyoming, 1879. The bride was 19 years old, and she carried a secret beneath her wedding dress that would have gotten her killed before sundown. Two secrets, actually. The first was the small pearl-handled derringer hidden inside her corset. Her grandmother's gun. 2 shots. That was all. The second was the child growing in her belly, 8 weeks along. The child of a boy named Tobin Marchetti, who had loved her since she was 16 and had died of typhoid fever 3 months before her father sold her. Yes, sold her. For $500 and a promise to clear the debt. The buyer's name was Cyrus Whitlock, 60 years old, a rancher who had buried 2 wives already and whose hands had bruised her wrist purple before the preacher even finished the vows. That night when Whitlock went downstairs for more whiskey, Mireille Vasseur climbed out the bedroom window. She stole a horse. She rode into the worst blizzard the Laramie Mountains had seen in 20 years. She wasn't running to save herself. She was running to save her child. What she didn't know was that high in those frozen mountains, a man named Bram Caramore was checking his trapline. A mountain man who had stopped believing in saving anyone 2 years ago. She was about to change that. And he was about to change everything. The wedding had taken 7 minutes. 7 minutes to ruin a life. The little wooden chapel outside Helena was cold. Frost climbed the inside of the windows. The preacher, a thin man with a red nose and shaking hands, drank from a flask between scriptures. Mireille's father stood by the door. He would not look at her. He had not looked at her in 3 weeks, not since the night he came home from town. His face the color of old ashes, and said the words, "I made an arrangement." That was how he said it. An arrangement. Like she was a hayfield. Like she was a horse he was trading at the spring auction. She had wept for 2 days. Then she had stopped weeping. Because weeping does not change a deal that has already been signed. Cyrus Whitlock came to the altar in a black coat and silver buttons. His beard was streaked with tobacco juice. His eyes were small and dark and cold as wet stones at the bottom of a creek. He looked at her the way a butcher looks at a calf. Quietly. Carefully. Already calculating the cuts. He took her wrist when the preacher said, "Take her hand." He did not take her hand. He took her wrist. And he squeezed. The bones ground together. Pain shot up her arm. Quick. Sharp. A warning, not an accident. She flinched. Her eyes flew up to his. He smiled. Just a little. Just enough so she would know. This is who I am. This is what I am. And you are mine now. "I do," she whispered. The words tasted like ash. The preacher pronounced them man and wife. Whitlock did not kiss her. He turned, dragging her with him, and walked down the aisle past the 4 ranch hands who served as witnesses. Men who smelled of cheap whiskey and wet wool. Men whose eyes traveled over her like she was a piece of meat hanging in a smokehouse window. Her father did not follow them out. Her father stayed behind, hat in his hands, staring at the floor like a man who had just buried his only child. And in a way, he had. The ride to Whitlock's ranch took 2 hours. She did not speak. He did not speak. The wind had started to come down from the mountains by then, that high, thin, keening sound the old folks called the cry. The cry meant snow. Big snow. Bad snow. She sat beside him in the wagon and pressed her hand against her stomach. Hush, little one, she thought. Hush. Mama's here. Mama's thinking. Because she had been thinking all through the 7-minute wedding, thinking about the small pearl-handled derringer her grandmother had pressed into her palm the day she turned 12. A girl needs a way out, her grandmother had said. Sometimes the world won't give her one, so you make your own. 2 shots. She had 2 shots. And in a house with a man like Cyrus Whitlock, 2 shots was almost enough. Almost. The ranch was bigger than she expected. A great hulking thing of dark logs and steep tin roofs set into a bowl between 2 ridges. Cattle moved like shadows in the falling snow. The bunkhouse glowed yellow at the edge of the yard. She could hear men laughing inside. She could hear the clink of bottles. Whitlock pulled her down from the wagon. His grip on her arm was the grip of a man who has handled livestock his whole life. There was no cruelty in it. There was no kindness either. There was only ownership. He took her into the house. He showed her the parlor where his first wife had died. Fever, he said in the same flat voice he used to talk about the weather. He showed her the kitchen where his second wife had died. Fever, he said again. He did not blink. She did not ask questions. She did not need to. He took her up the stairs to the bedroom. The bed was huge, carved oak, piled high with furs and quilts. A fire burned low in the iron stove. He pointed to the bed. He pointed to her. Make yourself ready. He turned. He walked out. He shut the door. And Mireille Vasseur, 19 years old, stood in the middle of that bedroom and understood with a clarity that felt like ice cracking under her feet that she would rather die than let him touch her. Rather die. Rather freeze. Rather be torn apart by wolves in the snow than let that man put his hands on the child in her belly. She moved fast. She did not think. Thinking was the enemy now. Thinking was the thing that talked you out of saving your own life. She crossed to the small bag her father had packed. Inside, wrapped in her mother's old corset, was the derringer. She slid it into the bodice of her dress against her ribs. The metal was cold. The metal was a comfort. She listened at the door. Downstairs, she heard him pour a drink. She heard him pour another. She heard him laugh at something one of the hands said through the open back door. That laugh. That laugh. She would hear that laugh in her nightmares for the rest of her life. She crossed to the window. She unlatched it. The cold hit her face like a slap. Below, the porch roof sloped down into a snowdrift. Below that, the stable yard. Below that, the world. She climbed out. The silk of her wedding dress caught on the latch. She tore it free. She did not care. The dress was already a costume from a play she had not agreed to be in. She dropped to the snowdrift. She rolled. She came up running. The stable was warm and dark and smelled of horses and hay. One of the bay mares was still saddled from the day's ride. Mireille fumbled with the latch. Her fingers were already going numb. She led the horse out into the yard, hiked up the heavy silk skirt, and threw herself across the saddle like a sack of grain. The mare bolted. Through the gate. Out of the bowl. Up. Up into the white. She did not look back. She was 19 years old, and she was carrying her dead lover's child. And she was riding a stolen horse into a Wyoming blizzard. And she did not look back. Because behind her was death. And ahead of her, somewhere, somehow, there had to be something else. The blizzard ate the world. It was not snow. Not really. It was a wall. A solid, screaming, suffocating wall of white that moved sideways and downward and inside out at the same time. The mare ran for half a mile. Then a quarter mile more. Then she stumbled, sank chest deep into a drift and screamed. Mireille flew off the saddle. She landed hard. The breath went out of her in one bright punch. When she could see again, the horse was gone. Just the sound of her terror swallowed by the wind. Mireille crawled. She got to her feet. She walked. The silk dress, which had been a mockery, became a shroud. Branches tore at it. Wire she could not see opened her arms. Her thin slippers filled with snow, and then with ice, and then with nothing, because she could no longer feel her feet at all. She walked until walking stopped. She fell. She crawled. She fell again. And somewhere in that white howling nothing, she stopped being a bride, and stopped being a daughter, and stopped being a girl with a name. She was just a thing. A small, wet, freezing thing. A flicker in the dark. She rolled down a bank. She struck something hard. Ice. The frozen creek. Hush, little one, she thought one last time. Mama tried. Mama tried so hard. And then the snow began to cover her like a blanket, and the world went very quiet, and very white, and very far away. Bram Carrowmore was checking his trap line. It was a fool's errand in this weather, and he knew it. But he had been alone in his cabin for 4 days, and the silence had started talking back to him. The silence had started saying things he did not want to hear. So he had pulled on his buffalo coat. He had whistled to his big gray gelding Tobias. And he had ridden out into the storm because moving was better than listening. He was 32 years old, and he was 6'4". And his shoulders had been broadened by 2 years of splitting his own firewood and skinning his own kills and packing his own meat down out of the high country. His hands were the hands of a man who had stopped needing other men. They were thick. They were scarred. The knuckles had been broken and reset 3 times. His beard was full and his hair was long. And the people in Laramie, on the rare occasions he came down for salt and coffee, called him the hermit and stepped off the boardwalk to let him pass. He did not mind. He had not minded anything in 2 years, not since Odette, his sister, his baby sister, who had married a freighter from Cheyenne and come home with a broken arm and a bruise on her cheekbone, the color of a thunderhead. Bram had ridden to that man's house. He had taken Odette home to their parents' ranch. He had thought in the foolishness of his youth that he had saved her. 2 weeks later, Odette had walked into the barn and put a rope around her neck. She had been 4 months pregnant. The doctor told them later. There was a baby, the doctor said. A boy by the size of him. We're sorry, son. Bram had buried his sister and his nephew under a tall pine on his father's land. He had stood there until the sun went down. Then he had ridden into the mountains and built a cabin with his own hands and stopped speaking to anyone for 2 years. Because he had learned a thing. He had learned that you can save a body from a man's fists, but you cannot save a soul from what those fists put inside it. You cannot reach in and pull out the fear. The fear stays. The fear eats. And one day the fear walks the body into the barn, and the body does what the fear tells it to do, and you are left standing over a fresh grave, wondering what kind of man you really are. He had learned that he was not the kind of man who could save anyone, so he had stopped trying. Tobias snorted. Bram pulled his scarf down. Easy boy. The horse tossed his head, backed up, ears pinned. Bram looked where the horse was looking, a patch of white against the white, a wrongness, a shape that did not belong. He dismounted. He sank to his thighs in the drift. He waded forward. It was a girl in a wedding dress, half buried in the snow on the bank of the frozen creek. Her hair was brown and gold and frozen to the ice. Her face was the color of a bruise that had been forgetting itself for days. Her lips were the color of a dove's belly. She was not breathing. He stared at her for a long second. He thought, leave her. She's gone. The mountain takes who it takes. He thought, turn around. Bram, don't be a fool twice. He thought Odette. He thought my sister. He thought not again. And then he saw it. The smallest flutter. A pulse in her throat like a moth caught under a glass. She was alive. She was alive, and the mountain was going to take her in the next 10 minutes if he did not move. He cursed. He cursed God. He cursed the storm. He cursed his own bad timing and his own soft heart. And the woman who had birthed him with a soft heart in the first place. He dug her out. She was lighter than she should have been. A bundle of frozen sticks and ruined silk. He carried her to Tobias. The horse shied from the cold weight of her. Easy. Easy now. He mounted, pulled her across his lap, wrapped his coat around her as best he could. The ride home was 3 miles. It felt like 30. He shielded her face with his own. His beard froze to her hair. He could feel no breath against his neck. He was carrying a corpse with a heartbeat. He kicked Tobias into a faster trot. Hold on, he thought. Hold on, girl. Because he had failed once. And he was so tired of failing. The cabin was a single room. Dark. Tight. Built by his own hands, log by log 2 summers ago. A stone fireplace. A cot. A table. 2 stools. A bear-skin rug in front of the hearth. He kicked the door open with his boot. He laid her on the rug. He moved fast. He piled wood on the embers. The flames jumped. The heat began to push back against the cold that was eating her from the inside out. He had to get her out of the dress. The silk was frozen solid. The pearl buttons were impossible. His fingers were thick and clumsy and shaking from the cold. He went to the table. He grabbed his skinning knife. He came back. He paused. For just 1 second. Because she was a stranger. Because she was a woman. Because there are things a man does not do. Then he thought of his sister. And he thought the mountain takes who it takes. And he set the blade against the silk at her throat. And he cut. He cut from the throat to the waist. He peeled the dress away. Underneath, she wore a corset of whalebone and steel. He cut the laces. The corset sprang open. Two things fell out. The first was a small pearl-handled derringer. The second was nothing he expected. He stared. He stared, and his heart did something it had not done in 2 years. It stopped. Because the woman on his rug, this near-frozen stranger, this stolen bride from a stolen wagon, from a stolen blizzard, had a small, soft swell low on her belly. She was pregnant. He sat back on his heels. He breathed out. His breath was a white plume in the warming air. Lord, he thought, Lord above, what have you sent me? He worked fast after that, because now there was not just one life on his rug. There were two. And the second one, the small one, the one that could not even speak for itself yet. The second one was the one Bram Caramore could not afford to fail. Not again. Never again. He cut the rest of the wet silk from her body. He cut the chemise, the stockings, the slippers. He worked the way a man works on a calf that has been born blue in a snowdrift. Quick, practical, eyes on the task, not on the body. When she was bare, he saw the bruises, dark, angry marks on her left wrist, finger-shaped shadows on her throat just below the jaw, a long, fresh purple bloom along her ribs that someone had given her recently, within the last day. He stopped. He looked at those bruises. He looked at the ruined wedding dress. And the cold, familiar anger settled in his gut like a stone dropped into a still pond. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. He did not know whose child she carried or how she had come to be in his snow. But he knew the shape of it. He knew it because he had seen it on Odette's wrist, on Odette's throat, in Odette's eyes the night she came home with her broken arm and said, "I fell." He took the derringer off the floor. He checked the cap. He set it high on the mantel, out of reach, because spooked things grab guns. He had learned that, too. He stripped off his own coat, his flannel shirt, his union suit down to his drawers. He pulled the thickest wool blankets from the cot. He lay down on the rug beside her. The fire was scorching his back. He did not care. He pulled her stiff, icy body against his chest. It was like embracing marble. He pulled the blankets over them both. He held her. He held a frozen stranger and the small life inside her, and he poured every degree of his own warmth into her, and he prayed to a God he was not sure he still believed in. "Don't take her," he prayed. "Don't take her. Don't take the little one. Take me first if you have to take anyone. Just don't take them." He held on through the night, and somewhere in the small, dark hours when the fire was low and the wind was high, he felt the first thing, a tremor, a shiver, a small, violent, stubborn shake that meant her body had remembered how to fight. Bram Caramore closed his eyes. He did not weep. He had not wept in 2 years. But something in his chest, some hard, clenched place that had been frozen since the day he buried his sister, that place cracked open just a little. Live, He whispered into her hair, "Live, girl, live." She woke to two things, warmth and the smell of wood smoke and a man. Her eyes flew open. The world was a blur, a low ceiling of rough-hewn logs, firelight on wood, and a heavy arm across her waist, a solid, warm body pressed against her back. She was naked. The panic was instant, acid in her throat, knives in her chest. Whitlock. He had found her. She had failed. She had failed her child. She screamed. It was a thin animal sound, a rabbit in a snare. She shoved. She rolled. She scrambled. She tangled in the blankets and went off the rug and onto the cold plank floor. And the shock of that floor cleared her head. The man sat up. He was big, dark-haired, bearded. His chest was broad and scarred and bare. He wore only his drawers. But his eyes were not Whitlock's eyes. They were not small. They were not cold. They were tired. So deeply tired, gray as winter sky. And in them, just for a flicker, she saw something else. She saw fear. Of her, or for her. She could not tell. Her eyes darted around the room. Fireplace, table, cot, and on the table next to a half-eaten loaf of bread, a knife. She lunged. She grabbed the wooden handle. She spun. Her back hit the rough cabin wall. She held the knife out in both shaking hands. She pulled the heavy blanket up around her with one elbow. "Stay back." Her voice was cracked, raw. "Don't touch me." The man slowly raised his hands, palms out. He did not get up from the rug. "Easy." His voice was low, rough, like a man who had not used it in a long time. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Where am I?" "Laramie Mountains, my cabin. I found you by the creek." "Who are you?" "Bram Carrowmore." She stared at him. He stared back. The fire cracked. She looked down at herself, at her bare shoulders under the blanket, at the pile of frozen silk steaming by the hearth. Your clothes were ice. It was that or I bury you in the morning." He said it flat. No apology, no threat, just a fact. She felt the heat climb her face anyway. He saw it. He looked away. "My shirt," he said, "on the peg by the door. Put it on. You're freezing again." She did not move. "I'm not going to touch you." He stood up, slow, hands still raised. He was tall. So tall that her terror flinched a little just at his height. He turned his back to her. He went to the fireplace. He added 2 logs. She did not move. He spoke without turning. "You can hold the knife the whole time." A beat. "I'm going to make coffee." She put on the shirt. She kept the knife. The shirt was wool and smelled of wood smoke and clean sweat, and a man who lived alone. The sleeves hung 6 inches past her hands. She rolled them. She rolled them again. She sat on the rug as far from him as the small room allowed, and she pressed her back against the wall and she watched him. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups. He set one on the floor halfway between them. He moved back to the stool. He sat. He did not look at her. He sipped his own coffee. The wind howled. After a long time, she reached for the cup. Her hand was shaking. She did not put down the knife. The coffee was bitter and black and the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. She drank. She watched him over the rim. He watched the fire. Finally, in a voice so low she almost did not hear it, he said, "How far along are you?" The cup stopped at her lips. The world stopped. Her free hand went to her belly without her telling it to. Protective. Instant. She did not answer. He did not push. He sipped his coffee. He stared at the fire. "Couple months by the look," he said. "Maybe less. Hard to tell on a body cold as yours was." She said nothing. Her throat had closed. He glanced at her then, just once, just for a second. "I'm not going to tell anyone," he said. "It's your business, not mine." And the way he said it, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Like a girl's secret was a girl's secret. Like the small life in her belly was hers to name, and hers to claim, and hers to protect. Mireille Vasseur began to cry. Not the screaming kind, not the running kind. The other kind. The deep, silent kind that comes from a place so old and so tired you did not know it was still inside you. She cried into her blanket. She cried into her bare knees. She cried because for the first time in 3 weeks, since the night her father had said the word arrangement, she had been spoken to by a man who did not seem to want anything from her at all. The mountain man Bram Carrowmore stared into the fire and gave her the privacy of his eyes turned away, and he did not speak. For a long time, he did not speak. The blizzard held for 3 days. 3 days in a single room. 10 feet by 12 feet of warmth in 1,000 square miles of white. She kept the knife near her on the first day. On the second day, she set it on the table when she got up to stir the beans. She did not pick it back up. On the second night, she had a nightmare. Whitlock with a knife. Whitlock standing over the bed. Whitlock saying, "What's mine is mine, girl. What's mine is mine," and the knife coming down toward her belly. She woke screaming. Bram was already up. He was halfway across the cabin before her eyes were open. But this time he stopped. He stopped 3 feet away. He put his hands up. He said very quietly, "Mireille, it's Bram. You're in the cabin. He's not here." She had told him her name on the first morning. She had not realized how badly she had needed to hear it spoken kindly. She was shaking. Her hands had gone to her belly. She was crying again, not screaming, just shaking and weeping. Bram did not come closer. Bram sat down on the floor, 3 feet away, cross-legged, like a child at a campfire. He waited. After a long minute, he said, "My sister was Odette, 22 years old, married a freighter. He hit her." A pause. "I went and got her, brought her home." A pause. 2 weeks later, she walked into the barn and hung herself. Mireille stopped shaking. She listened. She was 4 months pregnant, Bram said. We didn't know. The fire popped. I learned a thing then, he said. A man hits a woman, you can pull her out of his house, but he's already put something inside her head. Fear. It's like a stone in a pail. You can't reach in and lift it out. It just sits there. And it gets heavier. And one day it gets too heavy. He looked up at her. His gray eyes were wet. I won't let that happen to you, he said. If you stay or if you go, that's your business. But while you're here in my house with that little one in you, nothing's gonna happen to you. You hear me? Nothing. She heard him. She heard him. She slept the rest of the night without dreaming. On the third day, the wind dropped. Not stopped. Dropped. The cabin was warm. There was venison stew on the fire. There was coffee. Bram had gone out at dawn to check the trap line, and he had been gone 2 hours. And Mireille had used those 2 hours to wash her face and braid her hair, and wonder for the first time in weeks what kind of woman she might be on the other side of this. She went down to the creek to fetch water. She did not mean to find him, but she came around the bend with the bucket, and there he was. He was kneeling at the open black water. His shirt was off. He was scrubbing his face and his chest with a handful of snow and creek water the way a mountain man bathes when there is nothing else, and he is sick of his own smell. The sun, pale and watery, had broken through. It lit him. His back was broad, and his shoulders were corded, and the long puckered scar that ran from his collarbone toward his heart was white against his skin. His hair was wet and dark. His arms moved with the easy rolling strength of a man who had used his body every day of his adult life. Mireille stopped. She did not breathe. And something inside her, something she had thought died with Tobin Marchetti 3 months ago, that something opened its eyes. A heat. A pulling. A want. She stood frozen. It was not like Whitlock. It was not anything like Whitlock. It was not fear or duty or make yourself ready. It was hers. Her body. Her wanting. Hers. She had forgotten she could feel that. She had forgotten she was allowed to. He must have heard her. He turned. He saw her. His face went still. She dropped her eyes. She picked up the bucket. She walked back to the cabin so fast the water sloshed onto her boots, and her face was so hot she could feel it steaming in the cold air. That night she could not eat. She moved the spoon around the bowl. She watched him. He watched her. Neither of them spoke. After supper, he sat on the stool and pulled out his whetstone and his skinning knife. Shing, shing, shing. The slow, rhythmic sound of a man who had nothing to say and did not know how to be quiet. She sat on the bearskin rug. She watched the fire. She thought about the small thing in her belly. She thought about the small thing she had become. She thought about how Whitlock had pressed his hand on the small of her back at the altar, and how it had felt like a brand, and how Bram Caramore had laid her bare on this very rug to save her life, and had not let his eyes linger anywhere they did not need to. She thought about the way he had said, "It's your business, not mine," She thought about the man at the creek. She stood up. The whetstone stopped. He did not look up, but his hands stilled on the knife. She walked across the 3 feet of floor between them. She stood in front of him, so close her knees almost touched his. He raised his head, slowly. His gray eyes met hers. She was trembling, but it was not the trembling from the nightmare. It was a different trembling, a choosing trembling. This is mine, this one is mine trembling. She had been sold. She had been traded. She had been a price. She would not be a price anymore. Not tonight. Tonight she would choose. Even if it was a mistake, even if it broke her, it would be her mistake. Just do it, cowboy, she whispered. His brow furrowed. She swallowed. I don't... She closed her eyes. I can't have his hands be the last thing. I can't have that fear be the only thing I know. She opened her eyes. I want to choose. Once. Before everything. I want to choose. He set the knife down, very slowly. He set the whetstone down. He stood up. He was so much taller than her. He was so much bigger. And in any other room with any other man, she would have flinched. She did not flinch. He looked down at her. His face was a map of old pain and new disbelief. Girl, he said, I'm not... I know. She fisted her hand in the front of his shirt, the same way she had seen him grip a fistful of pine bough to steady himself in the wind. Please. He looked at her. He looked at this broken, beautiful, desperate thing in his too big shirt, with her hand fisted in his collar, and the ghost of a child swelling beneath her ribs, and every cold, lonely 2-year-old wall inside Bram Caramore cracked. He kissed her. It was not gentle. Not at first. It was a collision. It was all the ice and the rage and the grief of 2 people who had been left for dead by the world. Her knees went weak. He caught her. His hands came up to her face. Big hands. Calloused hands. Hands that had buried his sister and built this cabin, and cut a frozen wedding dress off her body, and held her through the night. He broke the kiss. He breathed against her forehead. Then he turned them. He stepped them. He pressed her gently, gently against the rough-hewn logs of the cabin wall. The wood was solid behind her. Real. Anchor. Not a marriage bed in a stranger's house. Not a wagon ride to a man who owned her. A wall. His wall. Their wall just for tonight. He cradled her face in his hands. He looked at her like she was something he was afraid to break. Are you sure? He asked. You have to be sure. She did not say yes. She reached up. She tangled her fingers in his hair. She pulled his mouth back down to hers. Then she paused. With her lips a breath from his, she whispered the only thing that mattered. You said you wouldn't let anything happen to me. Or the little one. I won't. Then don't. He understood. He understood every layer. He kissed her again, softer, slower. And his hand, his rough, scarred hand, came down from her face and rested very gently on the small swell of her belly. He held it there, like a vow, like a promise, like a man 24 months too late for his sister, finally getting to do it right. She kissed him. He kissed her. The fire crackled. The wind moaned. The Wyoming night stretched out around the small lit window of the cabin, like a black ocean around a single boat. And inside, two people who had been dying for a long time finally chose both of them in the same breath to live. In the morning, he was up before her. She woke alone on the bearskin rug. The blankets were tucked around her. The fire was high. The cabin was warm. He was outside. She heard him chopping wood. The slow, even thok, thok, thok. She lay there and she listened. She put her hand on her belly. Hello, little one, she thought. Mama did something good last night. Mama chose something for herself. The door opened. Cold air spilled in. He stood in the doorway with his arms full of split logs. His hair was full of snow. His cheeks were red above the beard. He looked at her on the rug, and the corner of his mouth did something it had not done in 2 years. It went up, just a little. He shouldered the door shut. He carried the logs to the wood box, and then he turned and he picked up something else. Something he must have been working on out in the lean-to. Something small. Something he had been hiding from her for who knew how long. He carried it across the cabin. He set it down beside the hearth. It was a cradle. A small wooden cradle. Pine, sanded smooth. The rockers were fresh. The wood was raw. The work was honest and rough and a little bit crooked the way a man's first cradle always is. He did not look at her when he set it down. He went to the stove. He poured 2 cups of coffee. He brought her one. He sat on the floor beside her and stared at the cradle. After a long time, he said, "Figured. The little one would need one." Mireille Vasseur, who had been sold for $500 and had run into a blizzard to save the only person in the world she had left to love, looked at the cradle and at the man and at the fire. She did not cry this time. She just leaned her shoulder against his arm. He stayed very still. Then, very slowly, like he was afraid she would startle and run, Bram Carrowmore put his arm around her. He did not say anything else. He didn't need to. The cradle rocked just a little on its uneven runners, and outside the Wyoming wind kept screaming. But inside the small lit cabin in the middle of 1,000 miles of white 3 small heartbeats, hers and his and the smallest one of all beat together, like the only fire that had ever mattered. The blizzard ended. It did not stop politely. It did not taper. It just stopped the way a man stops talking when he runs out of breath. One morning, Mireille opened her eyes, and the wind was gone. The world was still. The sun was a pale, watery disk above the eastern ridge. The mountain had decided to let them live. For now. She lay there on the bearskin rug and listened to the silence. It was a different silence than before. Before, the silence had been a third person in the room, a cold ghost, a jury. Now the silence was just air. Now the silence was just a place where something was about to begin. She put her hand on her belly. Hello, little one, she thought. We're still here. She had been with Bram Carrowmore for 5 weeks, long enough to learn the shape of his shoulders by firelight, long enough to learn that he took his coffee black and his bread burnt, and his silences like a man takes medicine swallowing them whole, long enough to learn that he did not snore, but he did mutter in his sleep, and the name he muttered was his sister's, and her own name had begun to slip in beside it. She had begun to dream of the baby, a girl in her dreams, always a girl, with Tobin Marchetti's laughing brown eyes. Sometimes Bram was in the dream holding the baby on his big shoulder, and she would wake up with her face wet, and she would not know if she was crying out of joy or out of terror, because joy was a dangerous thing. Joy was the thing the world taught girls like her not to feel. Joy was the thing Whitlock would come to take. Bram came in from the cold. He stomped the snow off his boots. He set his rifle in the corner. He shrugged out of the buffalo coat. His beard was full of frost. His cheeks were bitten red. "Sun's out." She nodded. "Be a thaw by noon," he said. "Crust by sundown." She nodded again. He looked at her. "You're quiet." "I'm thinking." "About what?" She did not answer right away. She was thinking that she was 4 months pregnant, and her belly was just starting to round, and the wedding shirt of her dead not dead husband fit a little tight across the chest now. She was thinking that a man named Cyrus Whitlock was somewhere down on the flat below them, drinking whiskey and counting his cattle and waiting for the snow to clear so he could go hunting for what he believed was his. She was thinking that the world had not forgotten her. The world was just waiting. "I'm thinking," she said, "that the snow won't hide us forever." Bram set down the kindling he had been carrying. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. That was all. That was Bram. He started training her that afternoon. Not asking. Telling. He set a tin can on a stump 30 yards from the cabin. He pressed the Winchester into her hands. The metal was cold. The metal was heavy. The wood smelled of oil and old smoke. "Stock to your shoulder," he said. "Tight. Like you mean it." "Bram, tight." She put it to her shoulder. "Tighter. If it's loose, the kick'll break your collarbone. Make the wood your bone." She seated it. Sight on the can. "It's so far." "It's not far. You're nervous, different thing. Sight on the can. Breathe out. Don't pull. Squeeze." She closed her eyes. Eyes open. Right. She squeezed it. The rifle slammed into her shoulder like a horse's kick. She staggered back. The can did not move. The can did not even think about moving. Somewhere above her, a startled owl burst out of a pine tree. She wanted to drop the rifle. She wanted to cry. She wanted to put her hand on her belly and say, "Little one, your mama is no good at this." Instead, she said, "Again." Bram looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of a thought of a smile. "Again," he agreed. She missed 11 shots. On the 12th, the can jumped. It spun off the stump in a flash of silver end over end and landed in the snow. Mireille lowered the rifle. Her shoulder was on fire. Her ears were ringing. Her breath was a cloud. She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. "Good," he said. One word. Just good. She felt it in her chest the way a fire feels heat. She thought, I am going to learn to shoot a man between the eyes if I have to. For her. For my girl. And the small life under her ribs kicked. For the first time. Just a flutter. Just a butterfly. Just a hi mama, I'm in here, I felt that. She pressed her hand to her belly. She did not tell Bram. Not yet. That one was just for her. The weeks rolled. The snow softened. The icicles dripped. The creek rose and growled under its sheet of black ice. Mireille's belly grew. So did her hair. So did her courage. Bram taught her to ride, properly. Not like a girl bolting from a stable in a wedding dress. Like a person. He's not a chair, Bram said, hand on Tobias's neck. He's alive. He can feel you. Feel him back. She felt him back. Bram taught her to read tracks. That's a doe. That's a wolf day old. That's a man on a horse 3 days headed east. She learned to tell the wind by the way the smoke leaned in the chimney. She learned to bake bread that did not crumble like sand. She learned to mend a tear in the elbow of a wool shirt without losing the stitch. She also learned this. She learned that Bram Caramore, mountain man, 6'4", 220 pounds of scar and silence, was terrified of her belly, not in a bad way, in the way a man is terrified of a bird that has flown into his hand. He would watch her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. Watch her hand drift to her stomach. Watch her wince at a kick. And his own hand, the one that could split a log clean through with one strike, his own hand would twitch on the table like it wanted to come over too. But he would not reach. He would not reach until she asked. One evening she was darning a sock. The light was low. The fire was high. He was at the table oiling the rifle. She said, without looking up, "You can feel her, you know." His hand stopped on the rifle. Her? I think she's a her. A long silence. Then, very quietly, "May I?" Yes. He came across the room like a man approaching a deer that had not yet decided whether to run. He knelt beside her stool. She took his hand. She placed it palm flat on the small mound of her belly. They waited. Nothing. They waited. Nothing. Then, a small, definite thump, right under his palm. Bram Caramore made a sound in his throat that she had never heard from a man before. It was not a word. It was not a laugh. It was something a man makes when his heart, which he had carefully wrapped in pine boards and buried under a ridge 2 winters ago, sits up in its grave and remembers it was never dead at all. He did not move his hand. She did not move hers from on top of his. The fire popped. He whispered, "Hi, little one." Mireille smoothed the back of his hand with her thumb, and she thought quite clearly, "I love this man. God help me. I love this man." She did not say it. Not yet. Some words you save for after the war. The visitor came on a Thursday. Mireille was inside kneading dough. Bram was outside splitting a downed pine. The jingle of mule bells drifted up the draw. Bram set the axe down. He walked calm and slow to the cabin door. "Inside," he said. Mireille's hands went cold in the flour. "Bram, inside. Don't make a sound. Don't move. Don't even breathe loud." She went into the back corner. She crouched. She put one hand on her belly and one hand over her mouth. Through the gap in the door, she could see him. A wizened leather strap of a man on a swayback mule. 2 pack mules behind him. He had a face like a wet apple left out on a windowsill all winter. "Eustace," Bram said. "Carrowmore. You're early. Snow's down. Pass is open. Figured I'd get my run done before the next one." Eustace spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You alive up here. Tougher than a boiled owl." "That's what I tell 'em down in town." He swung off the mule. He started untying the supplies. Coffee, salt, a bag of flour, a tin of lamp oil, a short chunk of bacon wrapped in wax paper, a packet of letters bound in twine. Bram took them one by one and stacked them by the door. Mireille held her breath. Eustace handed over the last item, a folded sheet of paper. Bram opened it, read it. His face did not change. His face did not even move. But his shoulders did a thing. A small thing. Not a flinch. Not a tightening. A settling. Like a man who has been told the weather is about to turn. "What's this?" Bram said evenly. "Reward bill. Cyrus Whitlock's runaway bride. Half the territory's got him. $50. Dead or alive way I read it. 50. A pause. "Pretty thing by the picture," Eustace said. "Brown hair, skinny. Said she stole a horse and run during the blizzard. Folks figure she's froze. Whitlock, he don't figure that. He's hot as a $2 pistol. Got men riding every trail." Bram folded the bill. He put it in his pocket. "If I see anyone," he said, "I'll let you know." "Reckoned you might." Eustace squinted up at him. The squint had something in it. "You want some advice from an old man, Carrowmore?" "No." Eustace cackled. "Whitlock ain't a man to cross, even up here, even by you. You got the look of a man with a secret." Bram looked at him a long moment. "I always look like that, Eustace." "Reckon you do at that." The old man mounted up. He clucked at his mules. He turned them down the draw. He raised one bony hand without turning around. "Be seeing you, hermit." "Be seeing you." Bram stood very still in the yard. He did not move until the bells had faded all the way down the slope. Then he walked into the cabin and shut the door. He pulled the bill out of his pocket. He laid it on the table. Mireille came out of the corner. The drawing was crude. The hair was wrong. The eyes were wrong. But the name was right. Clara. Nee. Page. Whitlock had not even bothered to give her the name Mireille, even now, even in a hunting flyer. He had refused to call her by the name her mother had given her. Reward. $50 gold for her body, for her child's body. She sat down hard on the stool. Her hand went to her belly. Bram watched her. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not say, "I'll keep you safe." He said very simply, "What do you want to do?" And in the way he said you, she heard the whole truth. He was not going to choose for her. Not anymore. Not ever. That night she did not sleep. She lay on her back on the cot because the rug had become hard on her hips with the weight of the belly, and she stared at the rough ceiling. The fire glowed orange. Bram lay on the rug now where she had once lain. He had insisted. She listened to him breathe. She listened to herself breathe. She listened to a third small, fluttering breath she could not quite hear, but knew was happening somewhere down inside her. And she made a decision. It came on her quietly, not in a flash, not in a vision, the way a real decision comes, the way the ice on a creek decides one morning to thaw. There is no announcement. The water is just suddenly moving again. She would not run anymore. She would not hide in a cabin and shoot at tin cans and eat venison stew while Cyrus Whitlock papered the territory with her face. She had a daughter coming. A daughter. And a daughter does not get to be born into hiding. A daughter gets to be born into the open, under her own real name, to a mother who walked in the front door of the world and said, "I am here, and I have done nothing wrong, and you will not have me, and you will not have her." She turned her head on the pillow. Bram was awake. She had known he was awake. He had been awake for an hour. She could tell because his breathing went very deep and very still when he was pretending to sleep like a deer pretending to be a stump. Bram. I'm not running. A pause. I know. I'm going to Helena. I figured. I'm going to walk into a courthouse and tell a judge what my father did, and what Whitlock did, and what the law calls a marriage that started with a price and a bruise. A pause. I figured. Her throat got tight. Will you come with me? The longest silence. The fire popped. Bram Carrowmore, mountain man, hermit, 6'4" of refused to care, said, "To the gates of hell, Marais." She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her temple into her hair. That far. Farther. She slept after that. She slept the deepest sleep she had slept in 19 years. The morning was wrong. She knew the moment she opened her eyes. The fire was out. The fire was never out. Bram woke before the fire died. Bram woke before she knew the fire was thinking of dying. She sat up. The cabin was cold. His coat was gone from the peg. His rifle was gone from the corner. His boots were gone from beside the door. She crossed to the door. She opened it. The yard was empty. Tobias was in the lean-to. Tobias never went out without Bram. She called his name. The mountains swallowed it. She pulled on his spare wool coat. She stuffed her feet into the rough work boots he had cut down for her. She walked to the woodshed, to the smokehouse, to the trailhead. His tracks went down the draw. His tracks went toward the supply trail. His tracks were running. She found him a quarter-mile down. He was kneeling in the snow. He was kneeling beside something dark. She walked closer. She stopped. She put both hands over her mouth. It was Eustace Crew, the old mail rider, the one who had cackled and called Bram hermit and ridden away on his swayback mule yesterday afternoon. He was face down in the snow. The back of his shirt was a bloom of dark red. A knife. A long knife. Right between the shoulder blades. Bram looked up at her. His face was a country she had never seen before. "They got it out of him," he said. "Got what?" "Where I live." The world tilted. She put a hand against a pine to keep from falling. "How?" she whispered. He didn't know. I was inside the whole time He was old Mireille. Old men talk. Old men have a drink in town, and they tell stories. The story doesn't have to be about you. Just has to be about a hermit on a draw who took his bill and didn't laugh. He stood up. He looked down the trail. They came right after he left. "How do you know?" "Mule tracks went down. 2 horses came up. They cut him here. They didn't even take his coat." He paused. They wanted speed, not goods. She stared at the body of the kind old man who had cackled at Bram and called him hermit. She thought Whitlock did this. She thought Whitlock killed a harmless old man over me. She thought I will not let him kill anyone else. "How far?" she said. Bram looked at the tracks. "Half a day, maybe less. Then we go now. Mireille. Now Bram." He looked at her. He saw, I think, the woman she was about to become. He nodded. They moved fast. There was no time for ceremony, no time for tears. They wrapped Eustace's body in his own bedroll. Bram carried him 100 yards off the trail into a hollow under a granite ledge and covered him with rocks. The ground was too frozen to dig. He took off his hat. He stood there for a long minute with his head bowed. He said only one thing. "You were a good man, Eustace. I should have sent you with a different answer." Then he came back. He saddled Tobias. He saddled the smaller bay he had bought in town, the autumn before, a quiet mare named Juniper Gentle on the rein, the right horse for a pregnant woman. He filled 2 saddlebags with jerky hard biscuit, a tin of matches, a flask of whiskey, and the Winchester in its scabbard. He pressed the small pearl-handled derringer into Mireille's hand. "2 shots," he said. "Don't waste them. You don't pull until they're inside 10 feet. I won't waste them." He looked at her belly, at her face, at the determined line of her mouth. "You are not the same woman I pulled out of the snow," he said. "No," she said. "I'm not." He helped her into the saddle. They rode. They did not look back at the cabin. They could not afford to. The way down to Helena was a 4-day ride in good weather. The weather was not good. The weather was a half-thawed treachery of crusted drifts and slick rock and a sky the color of a bruise. By midday, the wind came up. By afternoon, the snow was falling again. Soft this time. Big, lazy flakes. The kind of snow that hides tracks. Mireille was glad. The snow that hid them hid the men hunting them. Bram led the way on Tobias. The Winchester rode across his thighs. His head turned every few breaths. The ridges, the tree line, the ravine below, the sky. He did not speak. She did not ask him to. She rode behind him, one hand on the reins, the other low on her belly. The baby kicked once, twice, 3 times, like the baby could feel her mother's heart pounding. Hush, little one, Mireille thought. Hush. We're going to Helena. We're going to clean this. We're going to come home in the spring. She believed it. She had to. A woman who carries a child has to believe it. That is the deal. The first ambush came at the river crossing. The river was shallow there, 20 feet across the ice, broken up into floating plates. The bank on the far side was steep and rocked with willows. Bram pulled Tobias up. He held up his hand. She stopped. He sat motionless for a long time, watching the willows. Then he said quietly, without turning, "Off the horse." "What? Off now. Slow." She slid off Juniper. Her boots crunched in the wet snow. "Behind that rock," he murmured. "Stay down. Stay down even if you hear me yell. Especially if you hear me yell." She crouched. He nudged Tobias forward 2 slow steps. The willows on the far bank exploded. A rifle cracked. Tobias screamed and went down. Bram was already off him, rolling the Winchester up. Crack. A man pitched forward out of the brush and into the river. Crack. A second man behind the first jerked and sat down hard against a tree. A third rifle barked from somewhere upslope. The bullet hit the rock beside Mireille. Stone chips bit her cheek. She gasped. Bram was rolling again. Behind a deadfall now. Crack, crack. The third rifle stopped. Silence. The river ran. Tobias was still kicking. Slowly. Bram waited a count of 50. Then he stood up. He walked to Tobias. He put his hand on the gray's neck. He spoke very quietly. He pulled his Colt from his belt. He waited until the horse's eye found his. The shot was a small, flat sound. Tobias was still. Bram knelt there a moment. Then he stood. He came back to the rock. His face was hard. "Are you hurt?" "No." "The baby. Moving. Mad. Moving. Good." He looked at her cheek. "Stone cut. Bleed it once, then leave it. Get on Juniper. We go now. There may be more." She climbed back into the saddle. Her hands were shaking. "Bram, Tobias, don't. I'm sorry. Don't." He was old. He had a good run. "We go." He swung up behind her. The mare grunted under the double weight, but did not falter. He took the reins around her. He pulled her tight against his chest with his free arm. He kicked Juniper into a fast walk. His chin rested against her temple for 1 second. 3 of them was a hunting party, he said. Not a posse. Whitlock's hired killers. "Are there more?" "There's always more, Mireille." He paused. "Until there isn't." The night they spent under a ledge was the longest night of her life. No fire. The smoke would carry. No food. The smell of bacon would carry too. Just cold biscuit. Just a sip of whiskey to calm her nerves, and one for the baby's father, the man holding her now who had killed 3 men today and had not blinked once. She lay against his chest, wrapped in his coat and her own blanket in his arms. She listened to his heart. It was steady. How was it steady? How was the heart of a man who had just buried his horse and shot 3 strangers steady? She decided it was not steady. She decided he was holding it steady for her, because that is what he did. He held things steady. He held a freezing bride steady against his bare chest. He held a baby's small kicking foot under his palm. He held 3 killers steady in his rifle sights and put them down clean so that the woman he loved could keep walking. She closed her eyes. She whispered into his shirt, "I love you." He did not answer. For a long time, she thought maybe he had not heard. Then his hand, the rough, scarred one, came up and cradled the back of her head, and he said into her hair very low, "Sleep, sweet girl. I've got you." That was answer enough. The 4th man came at dawn. She did not know there was a 4th. She was at the edge of the creek, splashing water on her face, the cold of it shocking her awake. Bram was 30 yards off, saddling Juniper. A shadow detached itself from the willows. He was tall, lean, long coat, a scar down the side of his face, eyes the color of dirty river ice. He stepped out without a sound. He had a pistol in his hand. He aimed at Bram's back. He smiled. He had time in his mind for a slow, lazy smile. That was his mistake. Mireille's hand went into her coat. Her grandmother's voice was in her ear. A girl needs a way out. Sometimes the world won't give her one. So you make your own. 2 shots. That was all. The derringer came out smooth. She did not aim for his face. She did not aim for his head. She aimed for the thing they had taught her was the biggest target a body had. She aimed for the chest. She breathed out. She squeezed. The little gun cracked. So small. So polite. Such a tiny, mean little sound for what it did. The man with the scar looked surprised. He looked down. A bloom of red opened on his shirt right above his heart. He looked up at her. He took 1 step. He fell. The 2nd shot was still in the chamber. She held it on him for 10 seconds. He did not move. Bram was already running, pistol drawn, eyes wild. By the time he got to her, she was on her knees in the wet snow. The derringer still clutched in her hand, vomiting hard into a clump of alder. He knelt. He put 1 hand on her back. He took the derringer with the other. She wiped her mouth. She looked up at him. Her face was white. You saved my life." You saved my life, Mireille." He pulled her against him. He held her there in the wet snow while she shook, while her teeth chattered, while the small life under her ribs kicked once hard, like a child banging on a window. He whispered against her hair, "Don't forget that. Whatever you do, whatever you carry from this for the rest of your life, you saved me. You saved her. You're the bravest woman in Wyoming, and you're 19 years old. And I am, God help me. I am so proud of you." She started to cry. She cried into his shoulder for 10 minutes. He let her. Then he stood her up. He wiped her face with his thumb. He helped her onto Juniper. He said, "Helena's a half-day. We finished this." She nodded. She rode the rest of the way with the empty derringer in her lap. She rode the rest of the way as a woman who had killed a man to keep her child alive. She would never be a girl again, and she did not want to be. Helena, when they came down out of the foothills, looked smaller than she remembered. Smaller, dirtier, just a town, just a long, muddy main street and a row of false front buildings, and a livery and a church, and a few squat stone offices where the law did its business, a row of poles strung with telegraph wire, a few wagons, a few horses tied to posts, smoke from 100 chimneys, the smell of wet hay and coal and frying fat. She had been so afraid of this town. She was not afraid anymore. She was tired. She was bruised. She had a bullet graze on her cheek, and a man's blood on her boots, and a baby kicking in her stomach. But she was not afraid. They stopped Juniper outside a small clapboard office at the end of the street. The shingle hung crooked. The paint was faded. Eldridge Pemberton, attorney at law. Bram helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled. He caught her elbow. "Sisson," he murmured. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're walking into a war pregnant. You're allowed to be not fine for 1 minute." She looked up at him. She managed a small, crooked smile. 1 minute. That's all you get. She took it. She breathed out. Then she straightened her shoulders. She brushed the snow off her coat. She lifted her chin. She walked into the lawyer's office. The office was warm and small and crowded with books. The pot-bellied stove glowed. A man looked up from a desk drowned in paper. He was past 60, thin gray hair, spectacles, eyes that had seen everything once and most things twice. He looked at Bram. He sighed. "Carrowmore, I had hoped never to see your face in this office again." "Eldridge, what is it this time?" "Cattle dispute." "Did you punch the marshal?" "Worse. Worse than punching the marshal." "Eldridge." The lawyer looked at the woman beside Bram. He took in the dirty wool coat, the cut cheek, the brown hair, the unmistakable round of belly under the heavy fabric, the way she stood, spine straight, eyes clear. He set his pen down. He took off his spectacles. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Tell me it isn't her." "It's her Eldridge. Cyrus Whitlock's wife." "She was never his wife." "The territory says she was." "The territory is wrong." Eldridge Pemberton looked at Murray. He spoke gently. "What is your name, child?" "Murray Vasseur." "Where are you from?" "Kansas, originally." "And the man who married you to Mr. Whitlock, was he licensed?" "He was a circuit preacher who drank Mr. Whitlock's whiskey and could not stop his hands shaking. And the marriage was entered into freely, on your part." "My father owed Mr. Whitlock $500. A long silence. Eldridge closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Sit down, child," he said softly. "Sit down. Please." She sat. He poured her a cup of tea from a kettle on the stove. He handed it to her with hands that trembled not from age but from anger. "I am going to help you. he said. "I am going to help you, and we are going to do this properly, and we are going to make it stick. But I have to tell you something first." She looked up. "Your father is in Helena." Her cup stopped. "Mr. Vasseur arrived 2 weeks ago. He is at the boarding house on Pine Street. He has been asking about you in every saloon and every general store in this town. He is dying child. Consumption. Last stages. He has months, maybe weeks." Her hand was shaking now. The tea spilled. She did not notice. "Your brother passed 2 months ago," Eldridge said. His voice was very gentle. "The fever the doctor was treating. It took him child." The room blurred. Theo. Her little brother. 8 years old. The whole reason her father had taken Whitlock's money. The medicine. The doctor. "We'll save him. We'll save him." Her father had whispered the night he sold her. They had not saved him. She had been sold for nothing. She had been sold for nothing, and her brother had died alone. She put her hand over her mouth. Bram came up behind her stool. He did not touch her. He just stood there. A wall. "He came to find you," Eldridge said, "before he goes. He told me last week at this very desk that he could not die without trying to ask your forgiveness." She closed her eyes. A tear fell into her tea. "You don't have to do anything yet," Eldridge said. "You don't have to see him. You don't have to forgive him. You don't have to do a single thing on his account. Right now, we are going to focus on you. And the little one." He looked briefly at her belly. Then his eyes moved up to hers. "On Monday," he said, "I am going to file a petition with Judge Whitcomb to nullify your marriage on grounds of coercion and duress. I am going to charge Cyrus Whitlock with attempted murder hire of assassins and causing the death of one Eustace Crew mail carrier. Mr. Whitlock will be in this courtroom. He will not enjoy himself. We will see him broken." She nodded, slowly. "And the matter of your father." She put a hand on her belly. She thought of an 8-year-old boy who had whooped with laughter when she taught him to skip stones on the Kansas River. She thought of her own daughter swimming in the dark inside her, who would never know her uncle. She thought of her father alone in a boarding house on Pine Street, coughing up his life into a square of cotton. She thought of the long road from Kansas to Wyoming, and how all the men in her life had taken from her, and how she was the one in the end who got to choose what she gave back. She raised her chin. "I'll see him," she said, "tonight, but on one condition." Eldridge waited. "He stands up in your courtroom on Monday. He tells the judge what he did to me. He tells the world that he sold his daughter. Mereu. That's the price of seeing my face one more time before he dies, Mr. Pemberton. He owes me a witness. He'll pay it." Eldridge. Pemberton looked at the 19-year-old girl with the cut cheek and the rounded belly, and the steady, steady eyes. He took off his spectacles again. He pressed them to his forehead. "Carol Moore," he said quietly. "Yes. Where in God's name did you find her?" Bram, the mountain man, the hermit, the silent giant who had not smiled in 2 years until 5 weeks ago, looked down at the woman in the chair. He did not look at Eldridge when he answered. "In a snowdrift," he said. "She was the bravest thing in Wyoming then. She still is." Mireille reached up without looking. She found his hand. She squeezed it. Outside the small office window, the sun was going down over Helena. Tomorrow there would be a courtroom. Tomorrow there would be a judge. Tomorrow there would be Cyrus Whitlock, with all his money and all his hired men and all his lies. Tonight there was a dying father in a boarding house on Pine Street, and a daughter walking up the wooden steps to forgive him. Or not. She had not decided yet. She would decide when she saw his face. But she was the one deciding now. For the first time in 19 years, she was the one. The boarding house on Pine Street was the color of weak tea, 3 stories, a sagging porch, a widow named Mrs. Hatch who took 80 cents a night, and no questions. Mireille climbed the steps slowly. Her belly was heavy. Her boots were caked with the blood of a man she had shot at dawn. She had not changed her boots. She had not bathed. She had not put on a pretty dress. She wanted her father to see her exactly as the world had made her. Bram waited on the porch. She had asked him to. "This part," she had said, "is mine." He had nodded. He had not argued. He had pulled out his pipe and sat on the bench by the door, his big shoulders rounded under the buffalo coat, and said, "Take all the time you need, sweet girl." She climbed the stairs inside. Number 7, last door on the right. She paused. She put her hand on her belly. "Hush, little one. Mama has to go in there. Mama has to look at the man who sold her. Mama doesn't know yet what she's gonna say." The baby kicked. It felt like permission. She knocked. The door opened. A small, thin woman in a gray apron. The room behind her was lit by a single oil lamp. The air smelled of camphor and old sweat and the metallic tang of coughed-up blood. "Yes. I'm here to see Mr. Vasseur." The woman blinked. She blinked again. "You're his daughter." Her eyes filled. She stepped back. She put her hand to her mouth. "He said you'd come," she whispered. "He said it every day, even when the doctor said it wasn't possible." "Where is he?" "The bed. By the window." Mireille walked in. She did not look at the bed yet. She looked at the room. She looked at the cracked basin, the chipped pitcher, the little wooden cross above the headboard, the row of glass medicine bottles, the pile of bloody handkerchiefs in the wash bowl. She made herself look slowly, because if she looked too fast, she would break, and she could not afford to break in front of him. Then she looked at the bed. The man in it was not her father. The man in it was a thin gray ghost wearing her father's face. His cheeks had hollowed. His eyes had sunk. His hair, which had been sandy brown when she was a girl on the Kansas farm, was now the color of dirty wool. His arms on the quilt were sticks. The bones in his hands stood out like the bones in a chicken's foot. He saw her. His eyes filled instantly. He tried to sit up. He could not. He fell back against the pillow with a small wet sound. "Mireille," he whispered. "Hello, Papa." She had not called him Papa in 3 weeks. She had not been sure she would ever call him Papa again. The word came out small. It was small. It was not forgiveness. It was just the truth. He was her father. For better. For worse. For the rest of his very short life. She did not sit on the bed. She pulled a chair up beside it. She kept her coat on. She kept her hands in her lap. He looked at her. He looked at her belly. His face crumpled. "Oh, child." He started to weep, soundless. A man who did not have breath left for sound. "Oh, child." She let him weep. She did not weep. Not yet. Finally, he found enough air for words. "Theo. Eldridge told me. He went on a Tuesday. The fever broke. He looked at me. He said, 'Where's Mireille, Papa?' And then he went." She closed her eyes. She felt the small foot kick under her ribs. She opened her eyes. "I sold you for nothing," her father said. His voice was paper. "I sold you for medicine, for a doctor, for a chance. I told myself it was love. I told myself I had no choice. I told myself you would be safe with him because he was rich, and a man with money has no reason to be cruel." A coughing fit took him. He pressed the cloth to his mouth. The cloth came away red. "Mireille." "Yes, Papa." "He hurt you." "Yes, Papa." "On the wedding night." "Yes, Papa." He hit me hard, across the ribs, because I looked at one of his hands too long. He was going to do worse. So I climbed out the window and I rode into a blizzard. And the mountain man, his name is Bram. He pulled me out of the snow. He has not laid one cruel hand on me. Not one. And the child. She put her hand on her belly. The child is Tobin Marchetti's. His eyes closed. "Tobin?" "Yes, Papa." "That sweet boy?" "Yes." "Who brought you the apples that summer?" "Yes." "Who I should have let you marry?" "Yes." He wept. She did not. The small foot kicked again, and she thought very clearly. You are not allowed to break Mireille Vasseur. You are not allowed to break in front of this man. He sold you. He put you in that house. He is the reason you ran into the snow. He is the reason a horse is dead, and 3 men are dead, and you have a man's blood on your boots. You are not allowed to break for him. Not yet. Not yet. She sat very still. She let the silence hold them. After a long time, her father whispered, "Will you let me ask? Ask. Will you let me ask for your forgiveness, Mireille?" She looked at him. She looked at the gray ghost in her father's face. She looked at the bloody cloth in his stick-like hand. She thought of the kitchen on the Kansas farm. She thought of him lifting her onto his shoulder when she was 4. She thought of him teaching her to plait a horse's mane when she was 7. She thought of the night her mother died, and how he had sat beside her on the porch, and how he had said nothing, just put his arm around her and held her while the stars came out. She thought of him after the locusts, after the drought, after her brother got sick, the way his hands had begun to shake, the way he had stopped looking up. She thought of him signing his name on a contract that turned his daughter into a debt. She thought of all of it at once, and she said, "Papa, you don't get my forgiveness tonight." His face crumbled. She held up a hand. "You don't get it tonight, but you can earn it." "How?" Monday morning, Eldridge Pemberton's courtroom. You walk in. If you cannot walk, you have someone wheel you in. You stand up. If you cannot stand, you sit. And you tell the judge in front of God and Cyrus Whitlock and every gawker in Helena exactly what you did to me. No softening it. No saying you had no choice. No blaming the locusts. You tell them you sold your daughter. You tell them what for. And you tell them what it was worth. He nodded. He could not speak. He nodded. "If you do that," Mireille said, "I will come back to this room. I will sit in this chair. I will hold your hand while you go. And before you go, I will tell you that I forgive you." She paused. "Not because you deserve it, Papa. Because I will not let you make me into a person who carries that hate into my daughter's life. You don't get to do that to her, too." He sobbed then. He sobbed openly. She let him. She stood up. She crossed to the basin. She wet a cloth in the cold pitcher. She came back. She wiped his forehead. It was the first time she had touched him in 3 weeks. It was the first time he had been touched in kindness in 3 weeks. He laid his hand on hers. She did not pull away, but she did not squeeze back. Not yet. She had given him the path. He had to walk it. She came down the stairs. Bram was on the porch. He stood when he saw her. His pipe had gone out. He did not ask. He just opened his arms. She walked into them. She did not cry. She just stood there, forehead against his chest, listening to his heart, smelling the wood smoke and tobacco and clean wool of him. After a long time, she said, "I told him he has to testify." "Will he?" "I think he will. And then I'll come back here, and I'll sit with him, and I'll let him go." Bram kissed the top of her head. He did not say you were good. He did not say you were merciful. He did not say anything she did not already know. He just held her under the porch light of a boarding house on Pine Street, while the lamp inside burned low, while a thin coughing came down through the upstairs window, while the small life under her ribs rolled over and slept. Sunday she rested. Eldridge had taken rooms for them at a Mrs. Pollard's 3 streets over. A thick quilt, hot water for a bath, a meal of stew and biscuit that Mirella could not finish because the baby had begun to compete for the room. Bram slept on the floor beside the bed with his pistol close at hand. He did not let her out of his sight. Sunday, Mrs. Pollard came in with a black wool dress. "Mr. Pemberton sent it," she said. "Said you were not to walk into a courtroom in that bloody coat. Said no judge wants to look at a woman who has been bled on. Said he picked the dress himself." Mireille held the dress up. It was a simple thing. High collar, long sleeves, loose enough through the middle for her belly, a small cream lace at the cuffs. She put it on. Mrs. Pollard, who had buried 2 sons and a husband and had a face like good leather, looked at her and said, "You look like a woman, child, not a bride, a woman." Mireille looked at herself in the mirror. She believed it. For the first time, she believed it. Monday morning. The Helena Territorial Courthouse was a narrow building of pale stone. The dome was small. The bell did not ring. The benches were oak. The room smelled of beeswax and old paper and men's sweat. It was full. It was full because the news had spread the way news always spreads in a small territorial town. Whitlock's runaway. The mountain man. The hermit. The girl. The benches were packed. Ranchers, loggers, storekeepers. A row of women in the back, prim hats and tight mouths. Mireille walked down the aisle. She did not look at the women. She did not look at the men. She looked at the bench at the front of the room where Judge Harlan Whitcomb was already seated. White beard, black robe eyes like cold polished iron. He was watching her. He nodded once when she met his eyes. Just once. She nodded back. Eldridge Pemberton stood at the petitioner's table. Beside him stood a younger man she did not know. A federal man by the cut of his coat. A man Eldridge had quietly written a letter to last week. The kind of letter that brought serious people on a stagecoach in winter weather. At the defense table sat Cyrus Whitlock. He was in a black suit and silver buttons. He had a fresh bruise on his jaw from the bar fight he had picked Saturday night when he heard his bride was alive. He had a county sheriff named Doolittle on his right and a hired city lawyer on his left. He was smiling. That same small smile from the altar. This is who I am. This is what I am. And you are mine. Mireille walked past him. She did not look at him. She sat down beside Eldridge. She put one hand on her belly. The baby kicked. She breathed out. Whitlock's lawyer rose first. He was a wide man with a fat watch chain and a confident voice. Your Honor, the matter before this court is simple. A wife, a lawful wife, married before God and witnesses on the 12th of December, 1879, did on the night of her wedding steal a horse, abandon her husband, and conspire with a known recluse in an act of public adultery. We ask for the immediate return of the woman to her husband's home. We ask for the arrest of the man Bram Caramore on charges of abduction. We ask for the reward bill of $50 to be paid to the man Cyrus Whitlock as compensation for damages. He sat. Eldridge stood. Your Honor, the matter before this court is also simple. A child, a frightened child, sold by her father to a man who already buried 2 wives in unmarked graves on his own land, beaten on the night of her wedding before the wedding bed was even reached, driven by terror into a Wyoming blizzard where she would have died, but for the mercy of one decent mountain man. The petition before you, Your Honor, is for nullification. We do not ask the court to dissolve a marriage. We ask the court to recognize that no marriage ever existed. Whitlock's lawyer. There was a license. There was a contract for purchase. There was a preacher. There was a drunk. There was a wife. There was a girl. 19 years old. Bruised. Pregnant. Frightened. The lawyer stopped. He blinked. Pregnant. The whole courtroom drew breath. Whitlock turned slowly in his chair. He looked at Mireille. He looked at her belly. His face went white, then red, then a very quiet, very dangerous color of nothing at all. He stood up. Your Honor. Sit down, Mr. Whitlock. Your Honor, this is news to me. This is fraud. Sit down, Mr. Whitlock, or I will have you removed. Whitlock sat, but he did not stop staring at her. She felt his eyes the way a deer feels a wolf in the trees. She did not look up. She put both hands on her belly. She thought, he cannot touch you. He cannot reach you. He cannot pass through this oak rail. Be still, little one. Mama is here. Mama is here. Eldridge called her first. She walked to the witness chair. She sat. She placed her right hand on the Bible. She swore. She sat. She told them. She told them about Kansas, about the locusts, about her brother's fever, about her father at the kitchen table the night he came home with the contract, about Cyrus Whitlock's small dark eyes at the altar, about the squeeze on her wrist, about the bruise on her ribs, about the wedding bed she would not lie in, about the window, about the horse, about the snow. She told them about Bram. She told them about the cradle by the hearth. She told them about the man named Eustace Crew, who had been knifed in the back for being a kind old gossip. She told them about a man with a scar by a river crossing whose name she did not know, but whose blood was on her boots. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She told them. The room was so quiet you could hear the iron stove tick. When she finished, a woman in the back row was weeping into a black-edged handkerchief. A rancher in the third row had taken his hat off his lap and was holding it crushed between his big red hands, like a man who had just remembered his manners in church. Judge Whitcomb looked at her over his glasses. He said very gently, "Thank you, Mrs. Vasseur." He had not said Mrs. Whitlock. He had said Vasseur. It was a small thing. It was a very large thing. Eldridge called Bram. Bram took the stand the way Bram did everything. Slow, square, gentle around small things and immovable around big ones. He swore to tell the truth. Eldridge asked him to describe the night he had found her. Bram said, she was in the snow on the bank of a creek. She was wearing a wedding dress that had been white. There was no white left in it. She was the color of a person 3 minutes from gone. And what did you do? I dug her out. I carried her home. I put her by my fire. I cut her clothes off because they were ice. I held her warm. She woke up the next day. Did you molest her? No, sir. Did you abduct her? No, sir. She walked into my cabin under her own steam, more or less. She left whenever she wanted. She stayed because the world she came from was worse than the cold. Are you the father of her child? No, sir. The father of her child was a Kansas boy named Tobin Marchetti who died of typhoid in September. The child is hers. She has chosen me as the man who will help her raise it. That is a different thing, sir, and I am proud of it. The court went very quiet. In the back row, the women in the black-edged hats had stopped looking like a jury and started looking like grandmothers. A few of them, Mireille realized later, were grandmothers. A few of them had buried girls of their own. A few of them had been girls like her once a long time ago in places they did not talk about anymore. Then Eldridge said, "The petitioner calls Mr. Etienne Vasseur to the stand." A door at the side of the courtroom opened. A man came through. He was being supported by a young deputy. He could not stand by himself. The deputy half carried him to the witness chair. He sank into it like a man being lowered into a grave. Mireille's hand flew to her mouth. He had come. He had come. He was the color of cold ashes. He was wearing his only suit. Mrs. Hatch had brushed it for him, pinned a clean handkerchief to the breast, slicked his thin hair to one side. He looked for one moment like the man she remembered from the Kansas farm. He swore on the Bible. His hand shook so hard he could not raise it the second time. The clerk allowed it. Eldridge said very gently, "Sir, will you tell this court who you are?" "My name is Etienne Vasseur. I am Mireille's father." "And do you know the defendant?" "Yes." "Do you know how this marriage came to be arranged?" A long silence. The old man looked at his daughter. His eyes were full. He looked at Whitlock. His mouth went hard. He looked at the judge. He squared his thin shoulders. He said, "I sold her." The courtroom inhaled. "I sold my only daughter to that man for $500. He paid the debt my farm owed him. He gave me money for medicine for my son. My son died anyway. My daughter did not die in his house, sir, only because she had the courage I never had." A pause. "I knew before I signed that the first Mrs. Whitlock did not die of fever. The hands talk in the bunkhouse. I knew the second Mrs. Whitlock did not die of childbirth. The hands talk. I signed anyway, because I was a coward, sir. Because I told myself my girl was strong enough to survive him. Because I needed the money." A long breath. "I am dying, Your Honor. I will be in a box by Easter. I am here to tell you I am the worst kind of father a man can be. And I am here to tell you that the marriage you are looking at is not a marriage. It is a sale. I made it. I am the seller. There is no marriage in this courtroom, Your Honor. There is only the proof of a crime." Whitlock came up out of his chair. His face was white. "You doddering—" "Sit down, Mr. Whitlock." "He's a liar. Sit down, Mr. Whitlock." The marshal's hand went to his pistol. Whitlock sat. But his right hand had drifted slowly, very slowly, beneath the lapel of his black suit jacket. Mireille saw it. Bram saw it. Bram, who had been sitting in the front row behind Eldridge, stood up very quietly. The old man was helped back to his seat in the gallery. Eldridge said, "The petitioner rests, Your Honor." Whitlock's lawyer said something. It did not matter what. Judge Whitcomb lifted his gavel. He began to speak. "This court has heard." Whitlock came up out of his chair like a man pulling a snake from his shirt. The pistol came up with him. It was small, polished, pearl-handled. The kind of pistol a rich rancher carried inside his coat to settle small disputes outside saloons. He pointed it at Mireille. He said very softly, "You will not have my name." The world slowed. Mireille saw the muzzle. She saw the dark inside it. She thought ridiculously that her grandmother's gun had been prettier. She thought the baby. She thought, "I will fall on my side." I will fall on my side so the baby is up. She started to fall, but Bram was already moving. He came across the rail in one long step. He came across the open court in two more. He hit her shoulder with his shoulder and turned her and put his back between her and the gun, and the pistol cracked, and he grunted and went down on one knee, and a flower of red opened on the front of his coat over the old scar. Mireille hit the floor on her side. The baby kicked once, hard, like a child saying, "I'm okay, Mama. I'm okay." She rolled onto her hip. She reached into her dress, into the inside pocket Mrs. Pollard had sewn into the bodice of the black wool that morning. The grandmother gun was there. One shot left. She had reloaded one. That was all she had needed. That was all she had ever needed. She brought it up. Cyrus Whitlock was lining up his second shot, his pretty pearl-handled pistol, just like hers. She thought, "No, sir. No, sir. Not my child. Not my man. Not today." She squeezed. The little gun cracked. So small, so polite, such a tiny, mean little sound for what it did. Cyrus Whitlock looked surprised. He looked down. A bloom of red opened on the front of his fine black suit right over his heart. He took one step toward her. His knees gave. He fell. He did not get up. The marshal had his pistol drawn now. The hired lawyer was on the floor under the table. Sheriff Doolittle, the bought one, had his hands very high. Mireille was on her side. Bram was on his knee. Bram was trying to get to her. He was crawling. He was leaving a trail of red. She let the gun fall. She crawled to him. She put both hands on the wound on his chest. She pressed hard. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare." He smiled at her. He smiled. The big, stupid mountain man smiled at her, with blood on his teeth, and said, "Hi, sweet girl. Bram. It's the same scar. Bram don't. I always come up on this side. Maybe this time it'll close." She wept. She wept openly for the first time that day. Eldridge was beside them. The federal man was beside them. Two strangers were beside them. Someone was tearing a tablecloth into strips. Someone was running for a doctor. Someone was shouting for water. Judge Harlan Whitcomb stood up at his bench. He looked at the body of Cyrus Whitlock on the floor of his courtroom. He looked at the woman pressing both hands to her mountain man. He looked at the dying father in the back row weeping into his clean handkerchief. He brought his gavel down. Once, not loud. "This court," he said in a voice that did not shake, "finds the marriage of Cyrus Whitlock to Mireille Vasseur to have been void from its inception on grounds of duress, coercion, and misrepresentation." A murmur. "The court further finds that the discharge of the firearm by Mireille Vasseur was committed in lawful defense of her own life and the lives of others present, and no charge will be entertained against her on this account now or in the future." A louder murmur. "The court," he said, "extends its deepest regrets to Mrs. Vasseur, her family, and her companion for the failure of this territory to protect her sooner." He sat. The room exhaled. Mireille kept her hands on Bram's chest. Bram kept his eyes on Mireille. The baby kicked and kicked and kicked like a child banging on a door. The doctor was a tired man with steady hands. The bullet had gone through. It had gone through cleanly. Through the meat of his shoulder 2 inches above the old scar. It had not hit the lung. It had not hit the heart. It had hit muscle and gone through and out the back, and the bleeding looked worse than it was the way it always does. Bram was going to live. Bram was going to live, the doctor said, if he stopped trying to sit up while a man was sewing him. Lay back, you ox. Mireille. She is sitting 2 feet from your face, Mr. Caramore. She can see you. I'm here, Mireille said. I'm here. Lay back. He lay back. He did not let go of her hand. She did not let go of his. She buried her father on the 2nd of May. He had gone just as he had said he would before Easter. He had gone 2 weeks after the courtroom. Quiet. In his sleep. Mrs. Hatch, the boarding house woman, had come up the stairs in the morning with his coffee and found him already cold and already smiling, which Mrs. Hatch said was the best a person could ask for at the end. Mireille had been in the chair beside his bed the night before. She had held his hand. She had told him she forgave him. She had told him because he had earned it, not because he deserved it. She had told him because she would not let her child be born inside the cold rooms of her own unforgiveness. She had told him about Tobin Marchetti. She had told him about Bram. She had told him about the cradle by the hearth. She had told him last of all that if her baby was a boy, she was going to name him after the brother she had lost while she was running through a blizzard in a wedding dress. Her father had wept. He had whispered, "Thank you, my girl. Thank you, my girl. Thank you, my girl." He had not been able to say anything else. She had stayed until the lamp burned low. She had kissed his forehead before she left. In the morning, when Mrs. Hatch came down the stairs with the news, Mireille had nodded. She had cried. Not the running kind, not the screaming kind, the clean kind, the forgiving kind, the kind that comes after a long winter. The funeral was small. Bram, Eldridge, Mrs. Pollard, Mrs. Hatch. The young federal man whose name turned out to be Mr. Hetherington, and who blushed when Mireille thanked him. Father Ambrose said the words. Mireille shoveled the first spadeful of earth. Bram, his shoulder still in a sling, shoveled the second. She put her hand on her belly the whole time. When it was done, she stood at the small mound of fresh earth, and she said out loud, where her father could hear it, on whatever side of the wind he was now standing on, "He'll know your good parts, Papa. I'll tell him myself." Then she walked back to the wagon. Bram lifted her up with his good arm. They drove back to Helena, under a sky the color of new tin. She had her son in late June. He was 8 pounds. He had Tobin Marchetti's brown eyes and his grandmother's thick, dark hair, and a temper the midwife laughed of his very own. She named him Theo. His full name on the certificate the federal man, Mr. Hetherington, filed himself was Theo Tobin Vasseur. Bram had wept in the kitchen when she signed it. He had said, "He should have my name." She had said, "He has Tobin's father in heaven. He has you here. He has my brother. He has more men than most boys get. He doesn't need your name yet, Bram." We have time." Bram had nodded. Bram had carried his stepson to the cradle by the hearth and had laid him in it with hands that 2 years before had not held anything smaller than a rifle. The cradle rocked just a little on its uneven runners. Theo slept. The valley they found that summer was farther west, 3 days' ride from any town, a bowl of meadow ringed with granite, a river, aspens, pines, wildflowers in May that came up to a child's knees. Bram built the cabin himself, bigger than the old one, 2 rooms, a real porch facing south, glass in the windows. He had paid for the glass with a season of furs. He had carried the panes wrapped in blankets all the way from Helena. He had only broken one. Mireille planted columbine by the front step. She planted marigolds. She planted a row of potatoes and beans behind the cabin. She made bread that did not crumble like sand. Theo grew. The seasons turned. One winter came and went. The boy learned to crawl. He learned to pull himself up on the leg of the table. He learned to babble at the cradle and at the cat and at the fire. The next September, when Theo was 15 months old, Mireille was kneading dough at the table. The door opened. Cold air spilled in. Bram stood in the doorway with his arms full of split logs. His hair had a few strands of frost. His cheeks were red above the beard. Theo, on his unsteady little legs, took 3 wobbling steps across the floor toward him, both arms up, and said plain as day, "Pa." Bram dropped the logs. Mireille laughed and cried at the same time. Bram knelt down on the floor. He let the small boy stagger into his chest. He wrapped one big arm around him. He whispered into the dark hair on top of the small boy's head, "That's right, son. I'm Pa. I'm Pa from now on." The little girl came in the 3rd winter, January. Snow on the ground, the river frozen, the wind howling. Mireille labored through the night. Mrs. Pollard had ridden in 2 days before in case. Bram paced. Bram chopped enough firewood to last till May. Bram wore a track in the porch boards. When the cry came just before dawn, he came in. A girl. A girl with Bram's gray eyes. Mireille was tired. Mireille was happy. Mireille, propped on the pillows, looked at her husband as he leaned over the cradle. "What do you want to call her?" Mireille whispered. Bram looked down at his daughter. She blinked up at him with eyes the color of a Wyoming sky in January. He said very softly, "Odette." Mireille's eyes filled. "Odette," she said. "Yes, of course." He picked his daughter up. He held her against his chest. He whispered something to her that Mireille did not hear. Mireille thought, watching them, that she did not need to hear it. She thought, "He has put down the stone he was carrying. He has put it down. She is here. The other one is gone, but she is here, and she will be loved enough for 2. The girl in the snow came on a January afternoon. It was 4 winters after the courtroom in Helena. Theo was 4. The baby Odette was just learning to crawl. The valley had been theirs long enough that the trail in was an actual trail, though. Only Bram and Mireille knew the way. Bram was checking traps. He was thinking about coffee. He was thinking about Mireille's hands. He came around a bend in the draw. and he saw in the white a small, dark shape under a snow-laden pine. His heart stopped. He had been here before. He had been here before. He kicked his snowshoes off. He fell to his knees. He dug. A child. A girl. 5 years old, maybe. 6. Her hair was the color of corn silk. Her face was the color of a dove's belly. She was wearing a thin shawl wrapped around a thinner dress. Her shoes were the wrong size. Her lips were blue. She was not breathing. Bram dug her out. He pressed his fingers to her throat. A flutter. A moth under glass. He cursed. He cursed God. He cursed with love. He tore open his coat. He shoved her against his chest skin to wool the way he had once done with a girl in a wedding dress. He ran. He kicked the cabin door open. Mireille was at the stove stirring soup. Theo was at the table drawing on a slate. The baby was in the cradle. Mireille turned. She saw his face. She saw the small shape inside his coat. She did not ask. She moved. She had done this before. She knew exactly what to do. She pushed the soup off the stove. She pulled the bearskin rug closer to the hearth. Bram laid the child on it. Mireille stripped the wet clothes. She wrapped the small girl in dry wool. She climbed under the wool herself, holding the cold body against her own warm one the way Bram had once held her. Theo stood up at the table. His small face was solemn. "Mama, is she dead?" "No, sweet boy." "Is she gonna be?" "No, not while we are here." "Should I get the cradle blanket? The yellow one. The one Pa carried home from town." Theo went. Theo brought the yellow blanket. He laid it carefully over the small girl's feet. He patted them. "Hi, little one," he whispered. "I'm Theo. You're safe. We have soup." Bram, kneeling by the hearth, made a sound in his throat that he had only made once before. Mireille looked up at him. His eyes were wet. "Same draw," he whispered. "I know. Same creek. Almost. I know. It's been 4 years and a day. I know, my love." The small girl shivered. She shivered in Mireille's arms. Then she shivered again. Then she opened her eyes. They were brown. They were huge. They were terrified. She saw Mireille's face 2 inches from hers. Mireille smiled. It was the smile Bram had given her 4 winters ago when she was the small dying thing and he was the giant trying not to lose her. "Hello, sweet girl," Mireille whispered. "You're in my house. You're safe. Nothing in the world is going to hurt you." The little girl began to cry. She did not run. She did not fight. She just cried into the front of Mireille's dress, the way only a small thing cries when it has not been held in a very, very long time. Mireille held her. Mireille held her and rocked her and hummed in French the lullaby her own mother had sung to her on a Kansas porch 19 years ago. Bram knelt beside them. He put one big scarred hand on the little girl's back, the other on Mireille's shoulder. Theo climbed up against Mireille's other side. The baby Odette in the cradle made a small, contented sound in her sleep. The four of them sat there by the fire. The little girl cried herself out. Then she slept. She slept while Mireille smoothed her hair and Bram added a log to the fire, and Theo very seriously sat cross-legged on the rug and watched over her like a knight at a castle door. Mireille looked across the rug at her husband. She did not say, "Just do it again, mountain man." She did not need to. She just smiled. He smiled back. Outside the small windows, the Wyoming wind was singing its old song. Inside, the fire was warm. Inside, a stranger's child was already not a stranger. Inside, a family that had begun in a blizzard 4 years and 1,000 mercies ago was simply quietly bigger than it had been an hour before. That was how it always happened, Mireille realized. Not in courtrooms, not in vows, not in deeds and contracts and reward bills nailed to the trunks of pines. Family happened by the hearth, one small life at a time, one snow at a time, one rescue at a time. She named the new little girl Posy, because there had been a vase of late wildflowers on Mrs. Pollard's table the morning Theo had been born. And Mireille had decided then in some private corner of her heart that if she ever got another daughter, she would name her after a small bouquet. Posy stayed. Posy stayed forever. Bram filed papers in Helena that spring with Mr. Hetherington's help. The papers said in the careful hand of the federal clerk that Posy was the lawful daughter of Bram and Mireille Caramore. Mireille had taken his name by then. She had taken it the same week he carried the baby Odette into church for her christening. She had not needed his name to feel like his wife. She had taken it in the end because she wanted her children to share one. Spring came. The thaw made the river loud. The columbine came up. The marigolds came up. Theo turned 5. Odette took her first running steps. Posy laughed for the first time at a beetle Theo carried in for her on a leaf. One afternoon in late April, Mireille stood on the porch with a cup of coffee. The sun was warm. Bram was in the yard splitting wood for the next winter. He was bare-chested in the sun, brown as oak, the long puckered scar above his heart paler now, almost silver. The newer scar on his shoulder, the one from the courtroom in Helena, was still pink. He had 2 scars now, one for each life he had nearly lost trying to save someone he loved. Theo was riding a stick horse around the woodpile. Odette was on a blanket, chewing solemnly on a wooden spoon. Posy was at the porch rail beside Mireille, on her tiptoes watching her father. Mireille put a hand on her belly. It was small, so small you could only feel it if you were looking. But she was looking. 3 months along, maybe a little more. Another little life. A 4th small heartbeat choosing them, finding its way to their hearth. She watched her husband across the bright yard. She thought of a frozen creek, a wedding dress, a pearl-handled gun, a door slammed in the middle of a Wyoming night, a man on his knees in a courtroom, a father dying at peace at last. She thought of all the women in all the towns and ranches and snowdrifts and wagons across this hard country who had not been pulled out in time. She thought of her grandmother's voice. A girl needs a way out. Sometimes the world won't give her one, so you make your own. She thought of every woman watching her now, 4 years and 1,000 miles away. She raised her coffee cup just a little in their direction. This is for you, she thought. This is for every one of you. The ones who got out, the ones who didn't, the ones still trying. We make the way out. We carry each other. We pull each other from the snow. We build a porch. We plant marigolds. We keep going. She lifted her voice. She called across the yard. Just do it again, mountain man. Bram set his axe down. He looked up. He smiled. He came across the yard slow and steady, tall as a pine, brown as the earth. Hers completely. Hers from a snowdrift to forever. He climbed the porch steps. He kissed her. The Wyoming wind was warm now, almost gentle. Almost. It would never be entirely gentle. It was Wyoming, but it was theirs. And the small lit cabin in the small green valley held everyone they loved. And no one in this house would ever be sold again.